Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Helen, welcome to Consulting Leaders. Happy to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Let's rock and roll and jump straight into it. So tell us a bit more about you. What got you into consulting and leadership coaching after the fantastic world, yet stressful, of agency and your agency career?
So it's a funny one. I look back on those years now and think of them as a 20-year tour of duty in public relations and in global firms at high levels. I was on the board at the point that I sort of looked away. And what got me into this kind of work was realizing that I was far more compelled by my people as I thought of them than I ever was about column inches and campaign outcomes. And, clients really were more important to me as people, as humans, than they were the sort of income attraction that I was paid to think about. So there were clues all along that I was people oriented, weren't there? But it took me a while to notice. And, long story short, that's how I came to make my segue.
So what would you say is the number one problem that you solve today? Like, what's the outcome that you help achieve?
I think the number one problem is to solve clarity, purposefulness about leadership. Now, sometimes for people, that is about their own career designing the next chapter. Maybe they're at a career crossroads they didn't choose. They've been made redundant. Maybe they're struggling to get elevated. Maybe they've achieved the elevation, everything they ever wanted. And what they're finding is they're sort of floundering there instead of flourishing and, need to help to understand what that's about and how to course correct. So it doesn't really matter what the crossroads is, but the number one problem is bringing clarity to people who know they are standing at one, who are struggling to solve that on their own.
So a bit of a curveball question for you, because I see the benefit, right? How much of a problem is that in the head of the leaders? The reason I'm asking this is the benefit is clear, but for them to realize that this is a problem to begin with might be, like their heads down, they have everything to do, manage people, finance, expectations, board, and like, clarity is my number one problem. It's probably not the thing that they, think from the get-go. So how do you manage that? How do you help them realize that there is progress and results to be obtained if they tackle the right problem?
It's such a good question because, to be honest, I don't think it's for me to help them with that. I think what I really notice and observe amongst sort of my clients is that they've been circling that with growing awareness on their own. So they probably don't start seeking or tip into a coaching relationship until they're extremely aware that they're suffering some kind of quiet misalignment. And as you say, it's not a big illuminated crisis. This is a quiet misalignment often, where I'm finding I'm working with people who are sort of 20 plus years into their careers, and it did feel well calibrated. It felt purposeful. And then something's changed and shifted, and it's sort of beyond the radar, and they can distract themselves with the deliverables that sort of run at a pace and the seasonality of their working year, of course. But it's a growing sense of, is this really it every day till I retire? Because I don't quite understand it, but I know it's untenable all that time. And that's when they start looking for some kind of explanation as to the sort of the loss of meaning that's there. What is it that's sort of sucking their energy and making them feel like every Sunday is full of that sort of dread feeling when they open the laptop and think about what's coming up in the week ahead? For those people, clarity is invaluable and it's gold dust. What is the problem that they need to solve? And then, of course, how to solve it to remove that horrible, heavy feeling.
That's interesting because you're gonna approach the people who are already, because stating a problem very clearly is halfway through solving it, right? And from what I understanding, the positioning is I'm helping people who are halfway there already, in the sense that they've understood that this is a problem. Now we can walk. I like that, and that does make a lot of sense. Who can you remind us who's your ICP right now? Who's your ideal client, the person that you help?
So I'm working with individuals and I'm also working with companies. I would say individually, it's somebody who recognise they are feeling at a career crossroads. And as I say, that might be elevation. They might be on the brink of their next leadership elevation and just sort of struggling to consolidate into that role and make that happen and feel confident and intentional while they're doing it. Or it might be that it's more from the sort of leadership point of view. I'm cherry picking people who were probably the most vocal talent that they have, and watching something not quite hold that energy anymore and wanting to give them the support into the leadership role they have in mind for them.
That does make 100% sense. So tell us how you get the attention of those people. What has worked for you to get your brand, your service, your coaching in front of the right people? I have another question, but I'm going to let you answer this one first.
Fair enough. Do you know what? I think with this kind of work, it's ever so entwined with me. So in terms of positioning my branding, as others would call it, I think it's really about just exposing the right people who resonate with my messaging to these ideas that we don't just need to persevere professionally. If that's the way you're feeling depleted by that thing you do, you need to sort of look at it and solve that problem. And that takes acknowledging, and then it takes some accountability partnership probably, and definitely some ideation. So it's really things like webinars, things like podcasts. I write a lot, and that's something that the love of writing has really bloomed since the PR days, actually, because it's no longer about client messages. Of course, it's about what I'm genuinely passionate about and helping people with that. So there's a never-ending stream of that too. So those are the things that work for me. And I think the reason why, and this may or may not have been your next question, was it allows people who are sort of sitting with this quite uncomfortable stuckness, that intangible feeling something isn't quite right, is misaligned. It allows them to get to know me and the work that I do, and there's a bit of a formula. So over time, if they're sort of sticking with it, they understand that this is a proven system, really, to help people move from stuckness, as I call it, into this kind of radical career clarity and design that next chapter with real intention and purpose.
So I like that. And my next question is, how do you get the attention of the right people? The reason I'm asking this is, you mentioned working with companies as well, right? So I'm thinking of a leader who wants more clarity on their career, the next move, more meaning in their professional life. But at the same time, if you work with companies, then the decision maker is not necessarily the person that you're going to end up helping. So there is kind of a two-way street marketing here, in the sense of you need to pull in the decision maker, but also push your service to the person who is going to benefit from it. I don't know if the analogy is good, but how do you navigate that? How do you make sure that the person that you're going to help understands the value, and the person who's going to pay understands the ROI?
So I think it's getting a bit easier, actually, to talk to leaders within companies about the benefits of purpose, and understanding that their people are their most precious commodity is sort of language that's been around for an awfully long time. But, the reality of how do you really look after your people? How do you keep them feeling this energized if they're feeling ever so quietly misaligned, but then staying anyway? That is toxic to the company. So as soon as you start sort of talking in those terms, the people who hold the purse strings in the company tend to immediately know who they wish would benefit from that kind of support. And it's interesting because it just opens the doors. Often I'm invited into companies and we'll do a talk about something that is feeling resonating for their sort of leaders in waiting, as I call them, those real top talent, the stars that are sort of on the upward trajectory, and they're quite hard to keep energized because they're ambitious and energized. But if the opportunities aren't moving fast enough and the growth readiness isn't satisfied, that can become a different kind of stagnation issue. So those are the sorts of entry points, the sort of senior and the leaders in waiting that seem to resonate for the folks inside the companies who want to support their people. So that's what I find unfolds quite organically from those conversations.
How do you, and that does make a lot of sense. How do you sell that? So I understand how you address your product, who you address it to, and how you get the attention of the right people. The next thing is, how do you get them to take the leap, right? How do you move from problem awareness, solution awareness, maybe an initial conversation, to an SOW, a letter of engagement? Now we're going to work on this together. Can you walk us through your sales motion, Helen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost all conversational. Understanding, a lot of what I do is about helping someone understand what the right problem for them to solve in career terms is. And so the conversation initially focuses there. What is it that we want to achieve? And, you know, it sounds so simplistic, doesn't it? But actually, that deserves at least as much thought. And if you think about design thinking, then, you know, you'll know immediately how much effort and emphasis is put on that, the brief, really. Because what happens is, say somebody's been made redundant and they've lost their role, the knee jerk is always to say, I need to replace what I've lost. Actually, the right problem to solve in that situation is what would make you feel most alive for the next chapter. It may absolutely borrow from what you've lost, but it may also involve some redesign. What would you absolutely ideally want to be doing more of, if you're very honest? What do you wish you could segue into? What would feel more meaningful in an enduring way? And as soon as you create a bit more space for people to think that way, and it's the same for leaders who have a really committed trajectory inside a company, what would you like your legacy to be? Where are you on that curve? Then people start to get, I suppose, infused with a bit of hope, actually, and certainly agency is reignited. And that is where we start saying, look, the work we would do is, and you scope it out, but it's incredibly bespoke. So although there is a formula, it needs to be bespoke to each individual, because whatever they've just said in answer to those questions is very individualized and subjective. So it also then needs to match with the context that they're sitting within, the corporate context. So there's some ideation, there's some co-creation, and that designing is important. But from there, it's a clear question. This is what we would work on. My recommendation would be this. In 6 months, say, what will that mean, and we'd make it translatable. So it's not tangible because these things aren't, and I can't always guarantee results, but I can guarantee the work we will have done and the benefit of those outcomes to them. And that's where people are invited, is sort of, do you want to do this work? How invested do you feel at this time to do this work? And that's the process I move people through, I guess.
I like it because there is a co-creation even before, I was going to say before the work starts. That's not true, because it starts during the co-creation. But I think, and that's something we talk about often on this show, is more and more we live in a trust recession time, meaning anybody can claim anything that they want on the internet. It's very hard to trust who you're going to work with. People do their research. If you can manage, you listening right now, to, within your sales cycle, even at the marketing level if possible, start co-creating with the prospects so that you can actually showcase authority right here, right then, build trust, and bringing value that they would have otherwise not gotten, almost giving them the tools. And it's like, hey, here is the information, here is what you need to do, here is where you want to go, and like, this is the journey. Now, it's good to have the map, but if you have the guide at the back of your car telling you, hey, be careful, bump road here, hey, potholes there, hey, actually there is a shortcut there, you're going to go even faster. Now you make your decision.
Yeah.
at the
And
time.
actually, that's something I say quite a lot. It's one-to-one coaching relationship is a bit like an accelerant to your career goals.
Yeah.
It is different to reading the book or listening to a podcast, isn't it? Because you've got thought partnership and accountability partnership that makes it utterly bespoke to you. And I think that's the beautiful thing about one-to-one work, and what it needs to be. So that's where people feel the benefit, even in an initial conversation. And I think, to your point about credibility and trust, I completely agree. That's why those conversations are important. I mean, they can visit me on LinkedIn or on my website or whatever, and see that I have a background in psychology. But what you don't ever know is that you've got that intangible click factor with someone. And if you're going to be open about what feels vulnerable or what you feel blocked from achieving, that's enormously important in a world where you're attuned to success. And really, this process about redefining success for yourself and then tying it to realistic hopes so that you achieve it.
Amen to that. How do you, so once you start working with the leader, Helen, how do you optimize for retention? How do you, transform one engagement into another engagement and another engagement still with the same person? The reason I'm asking this is, at the end of the day, B2B coaching and consulting is growing if you get demands, for sure, but retaining is how you're going to scale. So can you walk us through a bit how you do that in your practice?
Absolutely. It's I mean, there's so many different ways actually, and I find them quite organic and quite individual. I think what happens on an individual level, if I answer that first, is that as you complete the initial scope of work that you started with, you will often find that someone is looking around. If you sort of imagine they're at a horizon, and of course they're at a different vantage point now. So now they can see the next layers that they would like to transcend. So the work isn't always just sort of started, completed, achieved, goodbye. It's often an evolution. So you stay with people longer sometimes than the initial interaction was designed for. What else happens is, and working with leaders in particular, they are then thinking of their team and they're talking about succession planning, or they're talking about growth, as in of the business, not just themselves. So that's where you start to have a ripple out effect. From there, with division leads, in big companies, global setups, you're often talking about different leaders for different P&Ls, and what you'll do is get an introduction to an entirely different one to do the same work in the neighboring department. And that will often start with talks, actually, and just talking about something really of interest. How to have courageous conversations when that's really hard is one of the most popular for leaders in waiting. So it can come from there, but travel through. So I think those are the sort of two different ways that seems to very organically grow. And I agree with you. Referral and recommendations is, by far, I think, not just the easiest, but the best fit way to grow and scale.
So that's interesting. I meant more another engagement from the same clients. I have a very particular opinion on referrals, but that's another topic. That's an interesting one. So yes, you need to get referrals. For me, referrals is the sign that you're doing a good job, right? If you deliver a good service, people talk about it. That's usually how it works. I mean, once you want to get to that next level of business, you cannot rely only on referrals. That's my personal opinion, because you're going to need an acquisition channel that's going to feed you people who have never heard of you before. That's a bit the difference. But for those initial engagements so the reason I got into this, Helen, is when I was working as a consultant at PwC, the partner who kind of taught me everything was like, Guillaume, there are two types of consultants. There are the hunters and there are the farmers. And he was like, I'm a hunter. I love the smell of fresh blood in the morning. I love to go after new business. That's my jam. And he was like, but the partners making the most money, the ones bring the most business in, are the farmers, the ones who are able to take that initial engagement, over-deliver, and transform it into a multi-layered, multi-year project involving other teams from the firm. Like, those are the ones who succeed the most. So for that particularly, not referrals that's going to get you another client, but more like, hey, let's do more together. Do you have any tactics or things that you do to enable that in your business?
Interesting. Not very formally, no. It's about, I suppose, just encouraging the person at the center of the work together to share what's been valuable about that and make introductions. So you go through the same process again with those neighboring departments or divisions and other leaders elsewhere within their company. So that happens. But I don't shoot for something, I suppose, I don't have a strategy to go and do that. If it doesn't feel right, that's fine. And, I suppose it's a sense of abundance that, rightly or wrongly, the right people find me and I do the right work with the right people. So I will always ask, I will always invite, I will always encourage. But if it's not feeling, like a fit or like something that would spread organically, then that's the right answer, actually.
And that totally makes sense. And I like the philosophy. What's the one thing that you're looking forward to work on, Helen? What's that one challenge that, once you fix, you're going to take the whole business to the next level? What would that be for you? And actually, we are recording this at the beginning of 2026. So what are you looking forward to work on in 2026?
So for me, it's about depth. I think what I'm noticing more and more, I've sort of been doing this for approaching 10 years, and what is ever so clear is that there are no hard boundaries between the personal and the professional. We are all one person, and therefore to be equipped to really help somebody unravel what's blocking them, what's stopping them, what's having them play small or go slower, is the piece, that psychological depth. And that will always be my addiction, the sort of psychology of it, not just rushing to resolution and achieving. It's definitely about alignment, because I think actually our secure tenure comes from that. If we are well aligned, and by that I mean continue to feel we're feeding our growth readiness and we feel alive and aligned doing that thing we do, that's when we can sustain it and we enjoy it. And I'm not saying it doesn't feel like work is work, but we're growing through it. And that's really important. So for me, it's always keeping an eye on that sense of expansion, which is for myself as well, but in order to support the people at the center of the work I do.
Love that. Helen, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
So LinkedIn is an easy go-to, isn't it? I would say if they want to find out a bit more, generally, my website is probably the right place to go. Lots more resources there, helenhanison.com, and that will also lead them to the book. But if they want to go straight to the book, Unstuck, which is all about a smart guide to purposeful career redesign, then that's helenhanisonbook.com. But actually, I'd love to make a special offer to your audience. And that was more along the lines of if they want to tell me a little bit more about their story, I'll pop a very short loom over to them, just giving them some sort of sense of feedback on my take about what they've shared.
Love that. We'll put all the links in the description. Helen, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time. How was that, Helen?